Stand on the beach at Santa Barbara on a clear day and you can see them. A line of islands out on the horizon, low and blue and flat, close enough that your brain files them as a swimmable distance. They are not. They never have been. Not today, and not at the lowest sea level of the last ice age. There has always been open water between that shore and those islands. 13,000 years ago, somebody was standing on one of them. All that is left of him is 2 thigh bones, buried about 30 feet down in the wall of a dry canyon. No skull, no tools, no name, and no boat. The island is Santa Rosa, the second largest of the Channel Islands, about 40 miles off the southern California coast. It is windswept, treeless in places, cut through by steep canyons that run down to the sea. In 1959, a man named Phil Orr was working one of those canyons. He was the curator of both anthropology and paleontology at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, and he had been coming out to this island for years. And he was not looking for people, he was looking for elephants. The Channel Islands had their own mammoths, and they were not the animals you were picturing. Cut a population of mammoths off on an island, give them limited food and no predators, and over generations they get smaller. The pygmy mammoths of these islands ended up roughly the size of a large pony. You can still see their bones sticking out of the cliffs in places. So Orr was out there chasing dwarf elephants when he looked at the wall of Arlington Canyon and saw a human femur coming out of the dirt. Now I need to be straight with you about the size of this find, because it is much smaller than you would expect from something this important. 2 femurs, one nearly intact, one broken up and degraded. That is it. No skull, no jaw, no teeth, no artifacts lying beside them, no camp, no hearth. And even the basics are not settled. Orr believed the bones were male. 40 years later, when the story broke again, a Los Angeles Times headline announced the discovery as a woman. The current assessment leans male, but that is a judgment made from thigh bones, and it comes with a shrug attached. What Orr could see clearly was the ground. Those canyon walls are Ice Age deposits, and the bones had come out of sediments from the end of the Pleistocene. He knew he was holding something extremely old. He also knew he could not prove it. Radiocarbon dating in 1959 was young, and the protein left in bone that old was beyond what the technique could handle. Anything he published as a date would be a guess wearing a lab coat. So he did something I find genuinely remarkable, and it is the reason we are having this conversation at all. He stopped. Orr took the entire block of earth containing the femurs, wrapped it in plaster like a cast on a broken arm, and carried it back to the museum on the mainland. Then he put it into storage, not to hide it. He wrote the discovery up in the journal Science in 1962 and told everyone exactly what he had. He just left the block sealed, on the explicit reasoning that the methods would get better and somebody would eventually be able to answer the question properly. Picture a plaster-wrapped lump of dirt the size of a large suitcase sitting on a shelf in a museum basement in Santa Barbara for decades, containing the oldest human being in North America. That block sat there while the story around it went somewhere Orr did not send it, because the press had already run ahead. Newspaper reports coming off his excavations on that island in the 1950s carried far bigger numbers. Charred bones among prehistoric elephant remains, dated to 29,650 years. National Geographic sources quoted as saying the diggings might yet produce something closer to 37,000. Those figures were wrong. They did not survive, and they were quietly abandoned. The newspapers got out in front of the science, which in this field is a tradition rather than an accident. Orr kept working Santa Rosa for another 2 decades. Chumash villages, middens, burials, more mammoth bone. Then he was finished, and the block was still on the shelf. Somebody else had to open it. That somebody was John Johnson, who took over as curator of anthropology at the same museum, Orr's own successor, inheriting his predecessor's unfinished business in a plaster shell. Roughly 40 years after the femurs came out of the canyon, Johnson had them analysed with methods Orr had bet on but never seen, bone protein analysis and radiocarbon dating that could actually handle the sample. The answer came back at about 13,000 calendar years. The National Park Service describes it as arguably the earliest dated human remains anywhere in North or South America. The only find in the same bracket is a child burial from the Anzick site in Montana. One honest note on that number before we go on. The dating leans on bone protein because the collagen in those femurs was poorly preserved. That is a narrower foundation than the 4 independent methods behind something like the White Sands footprints. It is solid, published, and widely cited. It is not bulletproof. And here is the thing, that date is the part everyone repeats, and it is not actually the interesting part. To see why, you have to put the Ice Age coastline back. 13,000 years ago, so much water was locked up in ice sheets that sea level sat hundreds of feet lower than it does now. The Channel Islands were not 4 islands. Santa Rosa, Santa Cruz, San Miguel, and Anacapa were all one connected landmass, and geologists have a name for it, Santarosae. Bigger island, shorter crossing, more land above water. Every part of that helps, but it does not help enough, because Santarosae was never joined to the mainland. Not at the lowest sea level, not at the coldest point of the Ice Age, not at any moment in the whole sequence. There was always a channel of open ocean between that landmass and California, which means the standard story does not apply here. It does not matter which route people took south through the continent, or when the ice opened, or how fast they walked. Nobody walked to Santa Rosa Island. Whoever left those 2 femurs went across water. 13,000 years ago, somebody on the Pacific coast had a boat capable of crossing open ocean and the confidence to get into it. Johnson has put it plainly enough. The find indicates people were using watercraft to move along that coastline at that date. And that reframes the whole thing. For most of the last century, the model had the first Americans walking down through the middle of the continent, through a corridor that opened in the ice, spreading out on foot. Arlington Springs is direct physical evidence for the other idea, a coastal route. People moving along the edge of the continent by sea, living off the shoreline, hopping between landfalls. It does not stand alone anymore either. Cooper's Ferry in Idaho has stone tools dated to around 16,000 years. Monteverde in Chile is accepted. There are early coastal sites on the neighbouring Channel Islands. The picture keeps filling in. I have not mentioned the thing that is missing from all of this. Nobody has ever found the boat. Not this boat. Any boat. There is no Ice Age watercraft from the Americas sitting in a museum anywhere, because boats in that era were made of wood, hide, reed and cordage, and none of those things last 13,000 years in the ground. And the beaches those people launched from are now a few hundred feet underwater, somewhere out in the Santa Barbara Channel. So the entire case that the earliest Americans had sea-going boats rests on this. A person is on the wrong side of water that could not be walked across. The vessel is invisible. The only evidence it ever existed is a man who could not otherwise be where he is. Which brings us back to 2 thigh bones in a canyon wall. Every other site in this story is an argument about when. This one is an argument about how, not a date pushed back. A method of travel proved by a body in a place that bodies should not have been able to reach. We do not have his name or his face or his camp or his tools. We do not know for certain whether he was a man. We have no idea how many made the crossing with him or whether anyone was waiting on the other side. What we have is a plaster block that a careful man refused to open, a canyon wall and 40 miles of water. Subscribe if you want more of these, and I would like to know what you think that crossing looked like, because nobody can show you the boat and the comments are about as good a guess as anyone has. Thanks for watching.